Hey, thanks for joining me in the garage again today. We're going to be doing a rear axle seal and bearing replacement on the 99 4Runner in today's video. I noticed while filming the backup camera install that the driver's side rear axle seal was starting to leak. So today we're going to go over getting it out of the truck, tearing it all apart, and putting it back together. Like, subscribe, comment down below. See you in just a minute. So here we have the axle already pulled out of the truck. We'll be getting how to do that in a moment. Before I do that, I wanted to talk a little bit about how this can happen and what the issue is in my case. This is the driver's side axle, and as I mentioned, I noticed the other day while filming the install of the new backup camera that there was a dreaded oil spot on the ground there in the garage. So after taking a closer look, I could see a drip of gear oil coming off the bottom of the dust cover, the rear brake drum. You know, this issue is kind of common on these trucks, and you can get a clogged rear diff breather, which will then, as the differential heats up while you're driving, it'll kind of, you know, expands the air inside there and can push gear oil out those seals if that breather is clogged up. That's not the case in mine. I have a rear diff breather extension installed, and so you know what I did after, you know, about a year and a half ago, I swapped in a set of Nitro 488 gears front and rear. And at the same time, when I did the rear, I put in new bearings and seals on the rear axle, just kind of as preventative maintenance. What I did is I found this Marlin Crawler Kit that has all the parts you need to replace it. It was a really good price, and so, you know, it comes with everything you need. It's got the seal for the actual axle housing. We'll get back to that in a second. And then the little dust cover that goes over the bearing case. And then, you know, a C-clip for on the axle. It comes with one retainer. Now I have ABS, so I need two retainers, but you can reuse one of them. And then the little O-ring that goes on the outside of the axle housing. And then, you know, also a good set of bearings. These are Nachi bearings, and so these are pretty good bearings as well. So it's a pretty full kit. The thing is, though, with this kit, it doesn't actually come with the Oem Seal, and so this here is the Oem Seal. As you can see, it's part number is 90310500006, and so you need one of these for each side. But the Marlin Crawler Kit here comes with this NAC seal, and these are not OEM. You can see the OEM one has kind of a metal outer seal there, and then the inner is just one piece of rubber, and then this NAK or NAC, I don't know how you say that, is got kind of a rubber outer, and there's actually two kind of lips in here. Now, the problem with these are the inside of the NAC, the NAK seal, is a little bit bigger. And, you know, it's not quite as flexible as the OEM seal. As you can see there, that flexes a lot. So what you end up with here is just a little bit of, you know, if the bearing or the bearing has a little bit of play in it, you know, and it starts wobbling a little bit, that seal is going to end up breaking, and then you're going to end up with gear oil. And I think that's the issue, is that the seals that are in there that come with that Marlin Crawler Kit are not OEM. So, you know, I think that, you know, even if you go ahead and you spend the extra $8 or $9 to get an OEM seal, it still makes this kit really good. I'm not sure if I didn't install the seal that comes with the kit properly, but you can kind of tell with the wear marks on here. Maybe a little difficult to see, but it's riding right on the middle of that retainer, and so makes me a little bit, you know, hesitant to think that I got it in there wrong. And so what we're going to be doing today then is just going through, we're going to show you how to take this axle out and then get all these parts off the axle. I've got a little tool for that. I've also got a new set of bearing cups. And so the old ones, when I did this a year and a half ago, or just kind of rusty and looking worn. So just to kind of pretty them up a little bit, I also got new bearing cases. So let's go get the truck up on jacks, get this thing off the truck. All right, as you can see here, we got the wheel off. So let's just see how bad this is. Yeah, that's kind of nasty. So you can kind of see here, got it all over the brake pads. You know, I think the next thing I'm going to do here is actually try to get a little bit of this cleaned up, and then we're going to get everything pulled off here and then get it back at the bench. So let's get that done.
Won't you wait for me? I need you to stay right there. I'm coming right away, my dear. I tried this, tried that, tried everything. Coming right back, right back. Won't you wait for me? I need you to stay right there. I'm coming right away, my dear.
All right, now that we got the axle back here on the bench, you can see here I've got the tool for getting this bearing and the ABS sensor. We can get this ABS sensor off without destroying it. Same with the retainer. In the manual, I think it says to cut these off in the factory service manual in order to remove those, but we're not going to have to do that. So the way this puller works is you've got this end here, which normally would fit on these 4 bolts when you've got it down on the axle. But to get this ABS sensor off, you got to have something a little thinner. And so you fit this in underneath the ABS sensor. And so now the trick is with this is, as you can see, you can't really get that under there with these bolts in there. And so we're gonna have to pound these, at least one of these out, and then that way we can slide that up underneath there. I'm actually going to be removing all 4, that way I can reuse those on the new bearing cup. So let's go down on the floor here, and we'll give these a couple of whacks with the old brass hammer here to get them out. When you do that, you're going to want to put one of your nuts that you got off of your axle on there. That way you protect those threads from getting mangled too much. Just kind of get it down there where it's, you know, almost even. But a couple of whacks with this brass hammer pops those right out. So let's go down on the cement here. I'll put a little board down underneath and we'll get that done. Just whack away. Just like that. Okay. So got those off. Should be able to just pop these out from underneath here now. Just little serrated bolts is all those are. All right, so the next thing is to show you how to get this tool on. So if we take these off, tip this on the side so you can kind of see how this then here just slides back behind that ABS sensor. And then slide this down over the end and it'll slide right in. And so then we put this on the press, and then we can pull this all off. And then at that point, we've got a clip that we got to get off of the axle that then we can press off, use the same tool to then press off the actual bearing and that final retainer that retains the bearing on the axle. So yeah, the next thing is to get this over onto the press. So let's do that now. All right, we're here at the press now, and so the way to get this up in there now that we have that tool attached, so I got a couple of blankets down here, and I've also got the press screwed down a little ways. And so usually what you want to do is kind of raise this up a little bit to where you can kind of rock this axle up in there. And then you can lower it back down. You want it basically on the 4th hole from the bottom. That way you have enough distance here to where you can get the axle shaft up in there. So there we go. There you go. So like I mentioned at the bench, you can see here, you can see that witness mark and kind of where that seal was riding, and so it looks like it was riding in a pretty good spot. Not sure if I had that seal in there wrong or what. So next thing is we gotta get that circlip off. So let's do that now. So I'm back at the bench in order to show how to get this circlip off here. Haven't had much luck. A couple of times I've done this using the set of snap ring pliers that I have. What I've ended up doing when I've had to do this is just take a couple of flathead screwdrivers and sort of wedge out the retaining groove that it sits in here. We're not going to be reusing the circlips. You don't have to worry about being gentle with it or bending it or whatnot. You do want to make sure you don't damage the axle of the groove it sits in. So don't go too heavy with the hammering or cutting utensils. So let's try to get this off right now. So like I said, just a flathead screwdriver. You can see here. Let's get a small hammer. Looks like it'll move. Sometimes when you're pressing these out, it'll kind of get jammed on this circlip, so you do want to be careful there. It's just these snap ring pliers I have aren't the greatest, but you can kind of get it started and then hopefully get a screwdriver in there. There we go. And you can kind of wedge it out. Start bending that out of place here. There that is. Now that the circlip's off, we can go back over to the press and get the outer retainer and bearing off. Before we do that, one thing I do want to mention is that I forgot to think of when I whacked these serrated bolts out. To actually get the bearing and this retainer off, you've got to have a few of those on there in order to attach the removal tool. So, you know, as you can see here, put 3 of them back. So when I go over to the press, I can be able to put that removal tool on there. Normally, you'd only need to remove 1 of these serrated bolts in order to be able to get the ABS sensor and ring puller off. So you can see here, I just have the 1 off on this one. So let's go over to the press now and we can get this bearing and retainer ring off. Right, now that we got that back on there, we can go ahead and get this back up in there, get that bearing and retainer all pressed out. So kind of the same process. Set it on the ground, move this up a couple slots, and then kind of sneak it up underneath there. Lower that back down. There we go. Oh, just fall right out. So there you go. All right, let's pull this all apart. We'll go back to the bench, take a look at everything. Okay, back at the bench here. So let's take this off. We got the nuts removed, so you can see here. This is just the plate. Got the axle down back at the bottom there. Gonna knock these little studs out here. All right, that then popped the bearing out, as you can see. So now I got to get this bearing case off of the dust shield. And I think again, just a few whacks. Yeah, that's coming off. There's the bearing. There, and there's the case. can see there's just a ton of gear oil in that, and on the bearing. Man, just a mess. So it's definitely those seals. I don't know if they were just in there wrong, but as you can see there, it was pretty shiny full of gear oil anyway. I think this will just be another little part that I have for spare parts. Even this bearing, man, I don't know if this bearing is still gonna be good. I'll probably keep it just in case I have spares. You know, it doesn't really have much play to it. It still feels really good. Problem with getting gear oil on these, and especially if you do it for a long time, is that these bearings, the seal here, even that will get all, you know, penetrated with that gear oil, and it'll wash out the grease that's sealed into these bearings. So, but you know, these I've hadn't had for very long, probably not super full of any kind of gear oil, so I think I'm just gonna store them away, keep them as spares. They still look like they're in pretty good condition, at least this one. So, all right. Next thing is to start getting this all put back together. Nice new case. All right, now that we got that all the serrated bolts there on the case done in, now I think next thing to do is to put that outer seal on. It's kind of a dust cover. So let's do that. So the way this goes in is this rides here on the outer edge, or I guess the inside edge is outer edge rides. That just kind of presses down. I'm going to put a little bit of grease on that. That'll help that get in there a little easier. Probably just do it by hand. Yep. Okay, press it down on there. Make sure that's good all the way around. And as you can see there, that's pretty well seated all the way around there. All right. Now the next thing to do is to put the axle in there, and then we can press the bearing in along with the retainer. So the way we do that is you don't need the tool for that, but with this tool comes a handy dandy press sleeve. So now it's just a matter of getting the axle slid up through there, and then pressing this retainer on. So let me flip this over, and then I'll grab the axle here, and I'll show you this little pressing tool. All right, here is the axle. So let me slide this plate on. So that's about as far as it fits, and then this retainer, and so you can see there is a beveled edge to this retainer, and so that beveled edge goes up. And then this tool goes down on it, just like that. So now we go back to the press. All right, we're over at the press. We've got this set on the 5th setting, and then the jack is, you won't be able to see here, but the jack is then screwed down a little ways. That way it's at this setting here. That way we can get it moved down a bunch. And then what we'll do here to start out, you want to get this bearing on there and then just kind of give it a few smacks there. That way it'll kind of stay on. And then you get your Harbor Freight press plates. You want this small little hole. And then also for a little extra space, I add a 1-inch plate underneath those just to give it a little more space. And then you can basically hold this, kind of put the axle down in there and get it situated. So since this plate isn't really in there yet, you'll see it kind of falls down a little bit and it'll set on top of that bearing. But then you can kind of get everything situated here. Don't pinch your finger. Kind of get it in there good and tight. And then the other thing I have is a little plate to sit on top here. That way you press down on that rather than directly on the actual center of that hub there. So kind of get everything centered. And then this will get the bearing pressed on. So we'll just kind of get this started here. Should go on pretty easily here. You'll have a little bit of a resistance once that's all the way in. Get it kind of snug, but other than that, now you have your bearing installed. So the next thing to do is get the retainer put on, and so we'll kind of take this apart a little bit. Also give you a good chance to take a look at it. Make sure everything looks like it's in there good. Nice and straight. That looks really good. So we'll pull that off. And then we'll grab the retainer. Just put that anywhere. Slide the retainer on. And as you notice, I'm putting the this longer side outboard. That way you have a little more space to keep this axle up off the cross member of the press. So once you got that in there, we can go ahead and slide that back in. Get everything centered up. Put your plate back in there. And then this will get the retainer pressed on. And then we can put that circlip on. I have a little trick for doing the circlip because it can be a pain in the butt. We'll get nice and tight. And then you know you're done. one. So now you can see you've got that retainer pressed right flush with the little circlip. It's probably hard to see, but we'll get our circlip here. And the way I do this, just slide it on the end of the shaft, and then I take a press sleeve. This is a 50, or excuse me, 40, I think a 40 millimeter inner diameter. And you can kind of slam that thing home. And then just double check, make sure it's in there everywhere. And that looks really good. Perfect. All right, hopefully you can see that there. So now the next step is to get the ABS ring on, and then the last of the retainers. And so there's a trick on these retainers, because you know, the issue also with these axle seals leaking is they've redesigned that new Oem seal. And so one of the tricks to be able to get this to set in there properly is, instead of putting this taper or this kind of you know, bevel on the inboard side of the axle, which would be setting like this, you flip it. And what you get then is more surface area for that seal to ride on. And you want to end up with basically 5 millimeters worth of axle, polished axle on here. And so as we press this down in there, we're going to make sure we have no more than 5 millimeters on there. And then actually, once we're done doing that, we're going to go in, put that seal on the axle housing, and then we're going to do what we call the grease test. And that basically will show you where that witness mark of that seal is going to ride on this. So let's get this pressed in, and then we'll go over to the axle housing, get that seal pulled out, and then we'll do that grease test to make sure we've got this, you know, not too far out and not too far in. We'll have it in the right exact spot based on where that seal is riding. So let's get this flip back on there. ABS ring goes first, and then this retainer goes on afterwards. So we'll slide those on, and we can put those on both at the same time. And then should be able to finish this job up. Get that nice and centered. Get that plate in there. All right, I think that's about 5 millimeters. Let's pull this off so we can measure it a little better. So I've got my calipers set just a little more than, well, a little less than 5 millimeters. And you know, that looks maybe a smidge deep, which means that seal is going to ride a little bit more inboard on this retainer, but I think that's about right. All right, let's go over in the truck and we'll see how that fits. All right, here we are back at the axle. So getting this seal out is the next thing we got to do. So there's a couple of tools that you can use to do this. There's kind of this seal puller, which I've used before. These can be a little dangerous because they can kind of scratch the insides depending on the size that you have on there. And then there's this little seal puller. You can also use a slide hammer that has like kind of an inside radius where you can just stick it in there and pluck it out. I'm going to use this. It should just kind of hook in here. You know, it has this little edge that you can get underneath the seal here, and then should just be able to hook it and then pull. Now that doesn't seem to really want to catch on. And so let's just go ahead and switch over to this. You got to be careful because if you get it too far in there, this can end up scratching your axle housing. And so what I like to do is just kind of, you can get in there, you're going to pry off of the axle housing there and just kind of protect it a little bit. And then just slowly get it out of there. Yeah, that is really in there. There you go. Wasn't too bad. Once you've got this then cleaned up pretty well, time to get the new seal in there. Here's our new seal. And for this seal, I've got a little seal driver kit. So this, if you've seen my toolbox tour, kind of showed you that near the end. What I've got is the 65 millimeter on this, and then that basically goes pretty well right around the radius of the seal, and so you can kind of get it started in there and then tap this in after that. So I'm actually going to take my gloves off since this is a little bit of a feel to it. Might help to put a little grease on it. Alright, put that on there and just get it tapped in here. Well, if it starts going in crooked, you can take kind of a drift here and give it a few taps as well. Help that go in. I think using this drift seems to be a little bit better. Alright, let's switch over to the seal driver here. Just give it a feel with your finger. You should be able to tell if it's even in there. And that feels pretty good. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put a little grease on this retainer here. And then the way it'll work is you slide this in there and you can tell where the grease gets wiped off this retainer, right where that seal is then sitting on the retainer. And as you know, I flipped this so that the bevel is on the inside and not on the outside. And so that gives you more room because the way these seals are, they redesigned them and it moved the surface of the seal or the edge of the seal outboard a little bit to where it was ended up closer to this bevel. And so what you can do to prevent that is if you flip the bevel, then it ends up being more surface area, more polished surface area of the retainer. that then allows for a little bit of travel, and that seal will seal a little better. So we're going to get this thing in here after putting some grease on it, and then we'll pull it, we'll get it all tightened up and then pull it out, and I'll show you where exactly that seal is riding. So I'm going to be right back here and I'll show you where that's at. All right, now I've put that in a couple of times now, and what you can see, and so as you can see right here, you can tell that that is pretty much right where it needs to be. You know, I didn't move it any, so it's about 4¼ to 4½ millimeters of polished axle there. And so I think that looks really good. So next step is just getting everything put back in here. So we're going to do that now, and probably give you a little time lapse of that. So here we are. So we're all done with this fix. I do need to bleed the brakes and put gear oil in the differential, and you can see my video for bleeding brakes up here. I know this is a long video, but before we go, I wanted to talk once again about a few things I found doing this job. First, I think for the 3rd gen 4Runner, it's critical, as I discovered, that you source an OEM Toyota axle seal. This Marlin Crawler Kit is a really nice, complete kit for the price point, but the seals in it should be replaced with OEM ones. The seal they include just isn't as pliable, and I believe seals in a way that the engineers at Toyota didn't design the axle housing for. And you can kind of see, you put this retainer in there on the OEM one, and you can kind of see the give that it has. Whereas with the Marlin Crawler seal, it just doesn't give. And so I think that's probably part of the problem. The lip on this seal as well is going to be kind of hard to see here. The lip, there's kind of 2 lips, whereas on the OEM seal, there's just the one. And so, you know, I think the way it's designed, and this is a redesigned seal, I think that's just how the axle and the axle housing are designed. That's my opinion, so just let me know in the comments if you agree or don't agree with that, or had a different experience with the seals included in Marlin Crawler's kit. Also, this bearing puller and installation tool makes this job easy and quick. I picked this tool up off of eBay from a seller named Donald the Bonald, and they go for about 120 bucks and are made in the USA in Omaha, Nebraska. The only thing you'll need more than this is obviously the press, some basic sockets, ratchets, wrenches, and maybe like a small plate. This is like a 4-inch by 1/2-inch plate for pressing on the hub end of the axle instead of on the actual hub. Save you a little bit of damage, hopefully. But otherwise, you won't need anything else. There are other tools out there that are similar and others that claim they'll get this job done, but the seller and his tool are very well known by the 3rd Gen 4Runner community, and I think should be supported. Finally, I did talk about keeping these bearings as spares, but as they sat here over the last few weeks, they've continued to seep gear oil. I think ultimately they're junk now, as the bearing grease encased them is probably too washed out for them to be reliable, at least for use on the 4Runner in any case. Maybe I'll use them on another project in the future, so I'll stick them in the junk bin for now. Hope you learned something today watching this video. If you have a comment or suggestion, leave it down below. Make sure to hit that thumbs up button if you like this video, and if you're watching the channel for the first time, consider subscribing. Thanks for watching, and keep on wrenching.